Welcome back to the channel. This is Caleb Jones coming at you with a review for Star Trek Strange New Worlds Episode 3, Ghost of Illyria. This was definitely a fun episode, but it was a little bit slow for my taste. But we'll start out with the episode summary. So, the premise of the episode is the crew of the Enterprise has been called to investigate an abandoned Illyrian colony. That's kind of the setup. We open with everybody being on the surface of the planet and multiple groups having to return to the ship due to ion storms. So everybody except Pike and Spock are beamed back to the ship. The crew that return to the Enterprise begins to become sick and have extremely low vitamin D levels. They also have a compulsion to move towards light like moths. Loran begins to turn up lights. That's the first kind of indication we have of the virus and what its effects are. Himmer tries to beam a molten fragment of the planet's core to the ship for light. Una discovers this and knocks him out and brings him to sickbay. Additionally, Chapel and Mabinga begin to kind of feel the effects, which is bad because, of course, they're the medical professionals. And Loran attempts to blow up the warp core to gain, basically, for there to be more light. And so Una has to actually fight Loran and knock her out, and again do the same thing. So while all this is happening on the surface of the planet, Pike and Spock barricade the door to the room they're in, the archive room, because there's spirits that are trying to break in. When they finally break through, though, the window burst out due to the ion storm, and the ghosts protect them. And Spock and Pike discover that the aliens were trying to protect them, and the Illyrian colony was attempting to undo the genetic engineering so that they could join the Federation, and that's why they were in their current state of being spirits, or basically being energy beings, because the effects of the procedure caused them to be that way. So Act 3 kind of brings the two stories together. Una realizes that it was her Illyrian physiology, which she had kept hidden, that held the key to curing the virus. A cure is synthesized from her blood and administered to the crew, and so everybody goes back to normal as far as their health. To Una's surprise, Pike does not accept her resignation when she goes to resign, and even admits that his preconceived notions about Illyrians were wrong. Una apologizes to Loran, who also accepts her apology. The final big reveal, which again I think it's interesting, has interesting setup and implications for the rest of the season, is that Dr. Mabinga, the reason why the containment for viruses didn't work when the transporter was used earlier in the episode, was because Mabinga has his daughter stored in the pattern buffer. Una understands why Mabinga didn't share this, although she, reprimands him for doing something out of Starfleet regulations. But also, she has compassion enough to set up an alternative energy source to power the pattern buffer to keep Mabinga's daughter alive. So we don't really know if she's going to be able to be brought back this season or if it's going to be more tragic. But that's an interesting plot thread I am looking forward to be coming up in the future. The whole entire plot surrounding the transporter system kind of reminds me of the Enterprise episode from Season 4, Dead List, where the creator of the transporter comes aboard the ship to, under false pretenses. Turns out he actually wants to save his son, who's been caught in a distortion in space, so he lies to the crew to get on the ship so that he can save his child. Also, fans of The Next Generation would know that in a particular episode, Scotty is actually trapped on a ship that hit a Dyson sphere in the pattern buffer, and so he's able to come back. So there's a lot of precedent for this type of thing happening. And also, I would say, too, that Una being genetically engineered also reminds me of the plot point of Julian Bashir in DS9 realizing he's genetically engineered, which is a great thing. I'm glad they did that in DS9 because it added depth to him, because he was good at everything before, and basically them giving an explanation for that and then kind of using that to build up his character was very cool. But it just reminds me because Una, of course, is genetically engineered similarly to Bashir. So the themes of the episode, I would say soft bigotry, basically. In other words, everybody thought the Illyrians were a terrible race of aliens who experimented on each other, but clearly we see that, even in Pike's words, he says that his perceptions changed on the Illyrians now that he knows that they were trying to join the Federation, but their genetic experiments just went wrong. Also, we kind of see uh, we see the divide between, or we see the conflict of personal sacrifice versus duty, which I think is a cool concept, and it's always been a cool concept in Trek, because sometimes what you want to do, like Mobinga storing his daughter in the pattern buffer, goes against what actually Starfleet regulations, which would have, which a lot of regulations were violated. And basically, it's Mobinga's fault that the virus even spread and could have killed the crew. So we see that, he refocuses at the end and basically says he didn't do what's right. And so we see that sometimes duty comes before personal sacrifice, especially whenever you're in an organization like the Federation. The episode, I liked it. Pike's speech to Una, particularly at the end, was good. And I like Pike and Spock's expectations being changed throughout their time on the planet. And it was kind of cool, too, because I don't think we've had a Pike-Spock team up, at least in this show yet. And so it's cool seeing both of them on the planet. Unfortunately, the episode was kind of slow. It was a slow burn, which, I'm going to be honest, I lost interest a couple times. And also, the message was kind of heavy-handed. And I guess an aspect I like is the campiness of everything. Just the idea of, like, people being drawn to light, like moths are drawn to light, is kind of entertaining. But also, I put it in the bad category, just because, or the negative aspects of the episode category, because it's just kind of ridiculous to think about. So for my final verdict, I'm going to give this episode a 7 out of 10. It was pretty entertaining, but at the same time, it was definitely not as good as the first 2 episodes of the season.